Hello and welcome to the Maus Werx series of how-to instructional model building videos. We here at Maus Werx strive to bring you the best information and techniques to help you get the most out of your model building experience. We will show you how the pros build models step by step so you can easily follow along. Most of the techniques you will see are very easy to learn and simple to accomplish. So sit back and let us show you the tricks and secrets to building your miniature masterpiece. This next technique is for all you people who build Israeli armor specifically. This does work on other types of armor, but it lends itself to a lot of the Israeli main battle tanks and so forth. And what it is a anti-slip grit that they put all over their tanks, and it's made up of fine rocks that have been mixed in with their paint and adhesive and put all over the tops of the tanks. This is actually pretty hard to simulate. There are a few products out there, I'm not sure if they're still available, to do this technique. For years it was Cast-A-Coat. I have come out with my own material. This stuff is actually called Maus Grip, and I'll show you how to apply it. The biggest trick on doing this technique was trying to get it thin enough to look like scale grip type material without it actually being too thick and too funky looking. So anyways, this is the technique on how to make a really nice finish on it. And the trick to this is the Maus Grip dust. Now this is an oxide, and so it does need to be handled carefully. You just do not want to breathe it in. Try to avoid it. Wear a mask if possible. And the other item I'm going to use is Maus Werx Clear, and that will actually work as the glue. Now you can use other types of glue, but I found they make the mixture too thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically look at this and figure out which areas I want to do first. I want to block it off into sections. And if you look at the photographs of real Israeli tanks, they are actually done in sections, so where there's panels and so forth, the grit won't get into and impede the opening of the panel. So we're just going to hand brush this around the edges and get it close to those panel lines, but not onto the panel lines. Plus, by doing it in smaller areas, it's easier to work with before the clear will dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to dip it into the clear, and we're going to just do this area here first and get it on there pretty wet. Just don't want to go over the edges. If you're worried too much about going over the edges, you can mask it off, but usually just using a brush works fine. And the material was put on pretty randomly on the real pieces of armor, so if the grit does not stick to everything, it actually looks more realistic of some of the grit that is worn off. So we'll go around the bolts, don't go over the bolts, that way you'll still see the bolts through this material. We're just going to go along the weld seam, and we're not going to grit over the weld seam. We'll make that actually one of the places where it splits apart. Okay. Get it to the edge here, and the grit was on all horizontal surfaces, rarely on vertical surfaces. So okay, I'll go back over the front here one more time. Okay, before that has a chance to dry, we're going to take the actual grit and lightly sprinkle it over, and we want to cover the whole thing, and don't worry about the loss of this, because we'll recover some of it after we're done. Usually put a paper towel underneath it to make sure it catches that extra. Now you don't want to tap it or anything, because then you'll crush it and give it kind of a weird effect and weird texture. And then before it has a chance to dry, just tilt it over, give it a tap it with the paintbrush here. Okay, and there we have that area done with the grit. If you miss some parts and it looks like you don't want to have them as parts that wore off, just give it a little more clear, recover some of the stuff you've used, and cover it up, tap it off. Same technique you did in kindergarten, putting glitter on your artwork. Okay, and we'll move to the different areas. When you get to, again, some of these panels here, just make sure you make the paint job on the inside. We'll show you how to do that one here real quick. And just keep it out of any of the way of any of the parts. If you're going to put on hinges and so forth later, keep it out of those little grooves. Okay. Again, we're going to cover the area. And tap it off. Now static will accumulate or attract this stuff as well in place you don't want it, so you want to brush that off. Maybe let it dry before you do this. But now when you finally finished all your pattern, you're going to want to take the clear coat. You're going to let it dry securely. Probably overnight would be best. Take the clear coat with an airbrush and airbrush the whole area to seal in the grit and to give it a nice tooth. That way it will also make it look, when you paint it, make it look a little more realistic, like the grit is in the paint instead of being on top of the paint. And once that's done, you can actually best to prime it before you paint it. That way you get a uniform color. And this is what the results will be. This is the hull. And you can kind of see how it's segmented into different areas here. And it's real tight grit. Went over it, sprayed it with a clear. You can brush it on as well if you want to. Then I did a primer grade, just to get it all uniform color before painting the actual color of the tank. I do these parts separately before I actually build the armor. It makes it much easier to apply the parts. So that's about all there is to do on the grit. You might give it a try. It's not used that often, but it's kind of fun to do. Works for walkways on aircraft as well.